All right. What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode, actually, episode number 68 on the Lure Lab here, part of the Serious Angler Network. As always, I am your host, the Captain, Andrew Full. And today we have an awesome one for you. Going back to like the roots, maybe even some backwater fishing might touch home for some people who live down in the South, but there's ample opportunities all over the country to do this type of fishing. And we have a kayak fishing master on today, Drew Gregory, and we're diving deep into backwater spinnerbait fishing. I think it's kind of a cool episode because springtime, you get a lot of rain, a lot of high water, a lot of muddy water conditions, even. And this is a way that you can kind of sneak away from some people if you can do it in a boat or a kayak or whatever your means of water transportation or on from shore, and throw some spinnerbaits around, some hard cover, and catch a lot of bass. So I figured, why not get Drew on here, and we're going to talk about this here. So let's get Drew on and see how things are going. Hey, Drew, it's been a long time.
It has been a while, man. It's that little lull in the winter,
Yeah.
but it's time. Like you and I were just talking about offline here. It's time to start thinking bass again. It's I live up north now, so not quite as early as the folks down south are already thinking about spinnerbaiting up shallow. But this is time to be filming this exact episode
Yeah.
because it's starting to happen around the country.
It's funny too. We got to this episode because I asked you about Ned rig fishing, and the only reason why I texted you about it, right? Like I was scrolling aimlessly on social media, and an ad came up from Omnia Fishing, and it was Drew's Ned rig rod, and I was like, oh, I should message Drew and see if. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh wait, he's a power fisherman. Why would I ever do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, that's funny. That was funny.
Like 8 o'clock this morning, and you sent me a laughing, crying emoji face with a haha, and I was like, what? What did I do wrong?
It's the last thing I want to talk about, man. But Drew Reese, so everyone gets that confused. Drew Reese is I guess the founder of the Ned Rig, and
Yeah.
so when they see something with my name and I'm associated with Z-Man so closely, then typically they think it's there's a color called Drew's Crawl in the
Yeah.
Z-Man line, and everyone thinks it's my color
Well,
I designed, but
it's funny. I know you don't fish those, but
yeah.
then in the back of my mind, I was like, you know what? It actually would be a great episode to make him go out of his comfort zone and talk about something so different, right?
That's true. That would be actually really interesting to see.
We
It
could have
actually
we could have made it work.
We could have, and then we could have then showed it or had somebody else on that really knows their stuff with that, and they could have graded me and judged me how right or wrong I was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I do know how to do it, and I fish it every once in a while, but it's just not my preferred method. I like to, as you can tell, my personality. Everyone knows I'm pretty spastic. I like to move fast. I do that, in the kayak fishing world and
You
power
can move
fishing.
faster than Ned rig. Just like
Yeah, that's true.
subsurface wake it, right? And hopefully one
That's
comes up
true.
and eats it.
Yeah, that's right. It's definitely possible. But and I fished a lot of shallow waters, backwaters, and rivers, which is a great segue
Yeah.
to what we're going to talk about, which is more your moving water baits. You don't have a lot of depth. I mean, you could Ned rig in 2 foot of water if you wanted to, but I'd rather just hit them with a spinnerbait, chatterbait, buzzbait, and then move on if they're not there.
Yeah, me personally, like I see water temps are climbing, and there's a classic coming up on the boater side, which will be kind of cool because it might take away from forward facing sonar if they get some muddy water. Actually, I think that lake typically runs slightly muddy, but you're going to see some guys chucking and winding a spinnerbait in open water, right? But as
Yeah.
soon as I start seeing water temps rise, like getting that mid 40s, bass's metabolism start ramping up, and you have that sun just baking, like
Yeah.
pretty calm, bright, sunny, you can pick up a spinnerbait early spring in flooded backwaters and really catch some really good one.
You
It's not
can. You
typically
can.
the weather to catch bass on a spinnerbait with,
No.
but
You,
and I think that's the purpose of this episode because it's that time of year, right? Like
that's right.
things are going to be wet. California is flooded out basically, so starting west coast to east, backwater spinnerbait fishing. So
Yeah.
let's kind of talk about it. What is
Let's,
backwater by your definition, and go right through
Yeah,
it?
let's dig into that. So you just mentioned the classic, right?
Yeah.
About, in Oklahoma, they're going to be on Grand Lakes. This is actually funny because we didn't plan this. I mean, you literally just texted me today, but I won a Bassmaster Kayak Series tournament on Grand Lake. First time I'd ever been there, only time I've ever been there. And I was in a backwater, and most of my fish in the event actually came on a jig, but some were on a spinnerbait, and I found the fish with a spinnerbait.
When they
originally
show
in practice.
themselves.
Exactly. In practice, I found them with a spinnerbait. So we're going to talk about that. And it's funny. I'll tie in some stuff. I'm going to be really interested in this Bassmaster Classic because I'm just curious if anyone finds my same spawning pocket that I wanted. That was in April, but I'm pretty sure if the water's warm enough, they're there as early as the Classic will be there. And it's a sneaky little spot. And I want it on the main lake in a spawning pocket, not in a typical Drew Gregory up a river or creek, which I think I'm synonymous for in the kayak fishing world. People forget, I don't always fish up a river or
You
creek.
fish where the fish are.
Yeah, I fish where I find them. Yeah, where the fish are. So anyway, it'll be fun to watch this event. But the backwater to me is, and you can help guide this a little bit on what you want to talk about. But for me, it's most of the backwaters on the lakes. I think a lot of your anglers that listen to the show, or you got kayak anglers, but a lot of bass boat anglers, and a lot of the backwaters to me are those initial oxbows and places that you see when the river meets the lake.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's the definition of actually when a river becomes lake is when I see the very first oxbow that's kind of flooded out of the original riverbanks, and it goes near, it makes a little cove or little pocket, and it wouldn't have existed if there wasn't a dam 60 miles downstream on that reservoir, if that makes sense. That's my definition of when you've actually fully entered the lake at that point. So I feel like those are the backwaters. And usually there's a good long section, you know what I mean? You could think about any lake, and they've all got it, Like your Tennessee River lakes, there's always a section of Tennessee River. And then you've got, where like, Chicago and Gunnersville, they all have a section, like Eufaula and the Chattahoochee, any of them, and then it overflows. So the cool thing about those backwaters, and it kind of ties into what we're talking about now, is that in the spring you got more rain, right? You got the more water, so you're typically going to get that murkier color water in that zone of the lake, whereas back all the way down to the dam you're going to get that clear water.
Mm-hmm.
Now the murky water lends itself to a spinnerbait, and a lot of the things you can do with the blades and whatnot lends itself to a spinnerbait, just because that the thumping, and it pushes out so much vibration, as and it's not so much the flash bite that you're kind of getting into that time of the year. But one thing I was going to say that to kind of lead us in to this was, in the 40s, you talk about water in the 40s, and a lot of people down south are like, man, that seems crazy that you're already throwing. But you know how you and I, Andy, we know, because we've lived on this earth long enough, that if you walk into the shade, it cools off 10 degrees. And if you walk over here in the sun, you warm up. And the cool thing about fish, and I learned a lesson in the middle of the winter in Georgia, where I grew up, on a Clearwater lake. I'm talking crystal clear, middle of winter. Actually, the lake, they stock it with trout. It's a private lake, a couple hundred acres. They stock it with trout in the North Georgia mountains. And I remember we were fishing for trout mainly. We got up shallow, and there was a bunch of just dead leaves in like a few inches of water. And it was a sunny day. It was a warm day. The water temperature was certainly in the 40s. And I saw a bass when we got close to the bank, just a 6-inch bass, 7-inch. It was really small, but it was definitely a bass, and it swam off, and we got too close to the bank there, and it swam off out from underneath that. And I was like, that's crazy that fish, typically they're living deeper. As we all know, they winter deeper, the thermocline, the warmer water, but they know there's a certain number of them that just know it's a sunny day. I can just push through and swim through that colder water. And when I get to the shore, especially in murkier, muddy water, like we're talking about, and these oxbows and these backwaters, that because of the sediment that's in the water, that it warms up quicker than clear water. So if you've listened to any of the Serious Angler podcasts, surely you guys have learned that lesson to this point. So I don't have to rehash all of that, but we know that warmer water, is generally the murkier the water, the warmer it can get, right, in the sun, and the shallower. So this fish was up there, even though this was clear water, he was up there so shallow, and it made me realize that, oh my goodness, like, they're just like us. They live in that lake. They know it by the back of their hand, or obviously the back of their fins, I should say, I guess. Better analogy with the fish. They know it like we know our world and our environment. So it was up there because it was warmer than either the thermocline water, or it was equal to, and it was just maybe trying to get some forage that lives up there, just ambush or whatever. But it was a pretty cool lesson that I learned. So they will be shallow. They will be able to eat baits like this in that water temperature you're talking about, just because they're early bird gets the worm, right? They're eager to get out there and start feeding. So that to me is the backwaters, but there's also the rivers and creeks that are true, they don't
Yeah.
flow the backwaters, but there are some natural oxbows in places like that. But we
Yeah, I
could
was gonna
talk
say
about,
you can expand backwaters too. Like if you're fishing a main river, like any small creek that dumps in or a drain
yeah,
that dumps into that river, and if you can get up that too, that is also essentially to me a backwater because
hmm
it's off the main river current, which is places that a lot of people will refuse to look or not even try to look. But there's a lot of fish that live in that area because it warms up quicker than your main river channel in the main lake, and it's always
hmm
dingier, always. So
yeah, that's
and
true. Yeah, so let's yeah, we'll get into it. So I feel like there's two kinds of spinner baits. Just as my little overview here. There is a sight fishing spinnerbait, and I feel like, if you look at a bass, they have big bug eyes. They can see in 350-degree radius. They can only not see right in front of their nose. They can see everywhere, and like God made this fish to be a sight feeder. There's no doubt about it. This is a sight feeder. Catfish is an opposite. They're more like a sense and smell feeder. However, even though they're made to be and they want to sight fish, that's when I'm throwing these fast, kind of a clear water spinnerbait, right? For those Alabama
double
bass,
willow.
spotted bass, yeah, double willow, and just burning them. I mean, I throw, 3/4, 1 ounce, but I'm like burning it. So it's still like on the surface, and it's your smallmouth, and it's hot. The metabolism is really going, and that's like my sight spinnerbait, and it's crazy that they'll eat something that just looks like this in the clearest of all water, and you're like, what in the world? But when you're burning it that fast, it mimics a little school of bait fish. To them is what I
They
feel, at
gotta
least,
have it.
and they just go for it. Yeah, it's crazy. So they're drawn to it. But we're talking about backwater. This time of the year, it's going to be kind of the opposite. It's going to be, dingy water, and you might put something like this on here. This is a wide willow I like to use. It's a chartreuse color. This is just a regular one that's not painted, but this is a fluted blade, which I like. It creates, actually, it's kind of funny. You can see some as I rotate here, you can see some flash off of the light here. But a fluted blade's pretty cool because it gives flash off of all these fluted parts, and it gives it a wider. There's like more, but anyway, that's your wider blades. Not going to go to the very beginning basics of spinner baits, but the wider they are, as opposed to a willow leaf, they're going to have
More
more
lift, more
lift.
thumb.
Yeah, more lift, more thump. So that's your willow. This is your wide willow, which I like. And then there's a Colorado, which of course is even more thump and more lift. So that we're talking about backwater early time of the year. I'm typically going to switch these blades out. So, I mean, you could obviously buy them with a Colorado already on it, but spinnerbaits are cool, and manufacturers put them out there, and you can just keep changing blades and configuring things how you want. They're making it to where it's affordable for you. So remember that, like, it may not have all the best components on it, but not every angler is like us, who's, hardcore series lure lab listening type folks that are maybe fishing a lot of tournaments and stuff. So the manufacturers will get you to a good starting point. You can take it from there. And so that's what I like to use in the spring. I generally, it's like 3/8, half ounce kind of range. Potentially, if you're fishing deeper, you're going to go 3/4 or an ounce. But I want to displace water because, like I said, this is the opposite. This is where I feel it's kind of funny, man, because I'm working on some lure designs, right? And for my clear water spinner baits, I want a thicker gauge wire, and I don't want like a 0.38, which don't even worry about the numbers I'm throwing out to you guys because you probably don't have a clue what I'm talking about. But I want a thicker gauge wire on my sight spinner bait, which is weird because you're thinking clear water, you want it to be thinner, more subtle, but I'm burning that one. And so I want it to
You
actually
need the
be,
stability of that thicker wire,
yeah,
which keeps it more stable, running more true and straight. And it's
yeah,
more of a visual bite as opposed to a feel bite.
right. And the feel bite, you want the thumping, you want that vibration of this wire to be able to move, and those blades to really, give that vibration and water displacement off better. So, the thicker the wire gets, the less, you have of that, the less thump. So it's kind of funny because I actually do want a little bit lighter wire for those, which is the opposite of what you would think. But I guess where we'll go now is out of the box. So I actually made one here. This is just Drew Gregory's thing. Okay. You may like it, may not like it, but this is just a Z-Man SlingBladeZ spinnerbait. I use a lot of these, and I actually take them out of the box. You guys can probably see this, And because I like to fish a lot of rivers and creeks, and again, this may not be applied to everybody here, but one thing I like to do is actually bend this forward. I bend this like forward like this a little bit. Again, like I said, they give it to you in one form from the manufacturer, and you can tweak it from there. And then bend this down. And I want these blades to get, so what that does is, let me get it just right here. It gets it real compact. For me, it's a real tight, compact spinnerbait. I don't like them real wide. The wider you get, the more lift they have. And they also can get, after you catch a fish, a lot of you guys may not know this, but after you catch a bass on a spinnerbait, some people just chunk it back out there. Yeah, it gets torqued out of whack and out of line. So you want to obviously make sure you hold it like straight like that up to your eye and make sure it's square, like dead straight on the money, as close to it as possible. Because a lot of times it'll look like this after a fish, and now it's bent to kicked to that left or right side. I don't know what. Yeah, roll. So you definitely want to keep them straight after every fish, and that's where that heavier gauge spinnerbait actually is nice too. It doesn't get contorted as easily, but for the ones we're talking about, you're always going to need to check that after every fish. But I just personally like to get the blades closer to the bait, because when they bite it, I'll do it like this because it'll hang vertical. When they bite it, their mouth hits that biggest blade there and it collapses through. And if the actual wire is going past the point of the hook here, if you ever see a spinnerbait in the store, the end of this wire where this willow leaf connects is beyond. So this hook point, when it collapses, it's going to create almost like a weed guard. So you want to make sure your spinnerbait's checking when you do that. The wire is not, past that.
So you're not talking about the barrel swivel, right? You're talking about
just the wire.
The eye on the wire should be ahead of the hook point.
Yeah, ahead of the hook point. And then, so now it's just going to collapse the whole thing when they bite it, and they're going to get the hook, which is one thing. So I just like it more streamlined. And again, keep that in mind. I do fish a lot of current and moving water, and a lot of these backwaters will have current. So let's not forget that. So it helps the bait get down lower and not just rise so much where you're always fishing. Just, you can't hardly get it down more than a foot or two. So that's why I like to do that. Personally,
and when you condense it too, that allows the bait to be reeled quicker down lower in the water column. Like you said,
exactly.
It eliminates lift.
Exactly. And I do that with my speed, sight spinnerbaits too. They're real compact, they're real tight, and just burn those. So these are going to be more of a slow roll thump. And you just kind of, the good news is, like I said, they can see in 360 degrees. They want to see, but they also have this lateral line. So when they can't see and it's murky for a good portion of the spring and a lot of fisheries, and even fisheries that it's stained all the time, that's just the way the water is, Red River, you name it. Like, there's places it's just stained, and those fish have adapted to, they're feeding a lot of times more with their, the lateral line, which helps them sense the water displacement. And that's just the way they live. Now it gets to a point where it's too murky and too nutrient rich, like the main Mississippi River in St. Louis or Memphis or wherever. And you just don't catch bass on the main river because none of them live there. It's too dirty. It never, at least with a, foot of visibility or foot and a half, when they get close to something, they can still see it. You know what I mean? Yeah. But how the Mississippi is, it's super muddy. It's like, so anyway, they just prefer, to obviously feed with sight, but then the water displacement for these spinnerbaits we're talking about with the blades like this, I especially love a painted blade when it gets, murky and murky water, a bright painted blade, because the flash isn't as important. I mean, the flash certainly can reach a little distance, but it's not like in the middle of the Susquehanna River or where you are on Lake Erie. It's so clear that flash of the sunlight off that blade is going to go really far away and call them from a long way away. But that's just not happening in the murky water anyway. So I just feel like that painted blade puts off a little bit more. It's just my preference. And I just feel like I see it better just with my own eyes in the water. When I'm reeling it in, I see that bait sooner than I do if I'm using one that's not painted with a bright, gaudy, like chartreuse color. The orange is popular as well, right?
Yeah.
So I just think, and using my own common sense, like if I can see it, a foot and a half down, but if I put on one with the regular blades, I can't see it till it's a foot away from me, then surely that's happening with the fish. So it could be not true, but could be a confidence thing, but it works, catches them. So that's my theory. But
I like it. So here, can we play a game real fast? I want to play like just a question like I'm going to throw a different spinnerbait option at you, and I want you to tell our viewers and listeners why, when, and where you would throw it.
Okay.
Does that sound like fun?
Yeah, that does. That's cool.
All right.
Let's
So
play it.
let's start off. You're going to pick up a chartreuse, like Colorado or Indiana bladed spinnerbait with a red or orange front blade on it. Where would you throw that, when, and why?
That's a good one. All right. So chartreuse is typically where I go for in, murky water. But it's funny because it also does work in clear water too.
Yeah.
It really does. Like, and so when I'm burning a bait, I don't ignore chartreuse in clear water either. But yeah, I think that's a good one for, I'm kind of confused because, like, is this still backwater, murky water situation? Okay.
Yeah, like like water temps, where would you throw it?
Yeah.
Like everything is backwater spinnerbait fishing. So, got murky water, like we're assuming, right, that there's murky water, maybe cypress trees or something along those lines. Like, where would you exactly throw that spinnerbait, and how would you maybe even retrieve it?
Yeah, I would pretty much focus on, like, you got the red. I'm not sure, red is much different than it's a painted blade. So on the front than a green, you're just wanting my theory on that, wanting the visibility. And I would say, confidence. Like in the, once you get to the water, that in the shallows, again, it's in starting to get to those 50-degree, levels, that's what I prefer. And just slow roll it by, structure. Spinnerbaits are much better than chatterbaits around wood. So that's why I tend to, in murky water, go with a spinnerbait if I'm fishing wood as opposed to a chatterbait. Chatterbait might be a little bit better in grass. So I'm going to put that around like cypress tree, any laydowns, any wood. I'm going to parallel any of the structure when I can. In a bass boat, you can do it. It may not be as easy as a kayak, and you should be doing it. But basically just front end your partner, you know what I mean? Like be right on the bank to make sure your bait's getting parallel to the bank or any of the structure of the cover, any, anything like that. So I'm going to throw that kind of just on, really hit as much wood as I can. Now rock can warm up quick. So like riprap and stuff like that does warm up quick. So yeah, that could be a player. Again, we're talking backwater, so I don't imagine a lot of riprap being in these backwaters, oxbow kind of places.
Hey, you never know where they're putting rock, right?
That's true. You don't know. There's the small culverts and pipes, from smaller roads and things like that, and smaller bridges back there. You can certainly get into it. So, yeah, I would think, that's gonna be a good one for wood. Kind of feeling it, slow rolling it, and feeling that thump, because you're gonna get more vibration with the blade combination. You talked about that Colorado, Indiana, and just you're basically letting the fish dictate how fast you're working it for that day. Because like I said, you might feel like, oh, the water's freezing cold, but in the 6-inch water column or foot, you're throwing it because of the sun in that day, like in the afternoon, for example, in the spring and early winter, they might be more aggressive than you realize. And you'll just let the fish kind of start to dictate that once you, get some bites and see, because sometimes they will. It's funny. Grand Lake's a good example. When I won that tournament, I had a first couple fish were on a spinnerbait in the tournament, and they grabbed it. I mean, I saw them come up as slow as molasses right at the boat. I have a foot of line out. I got it on GoPro, and I just lifted the fish in the boat, and it's like, and he just came up and just barely nipped it, and I just lifted him right. It wasn't like a thrash, you know what I mean, at all. And so when you're fishing that shallow, you're going to see the boil. You're going to see how fast they react. So for me, that combination that you gave me is definitely let's go medium, slow, and then let the fish sort of, and how hard the bites are, feel, where it's going to be. I mean, how it's going to be like fish faster or slower that day. But no, that's a good one for sure. And
ready for another one?
I'm ready for another one that we can definitely get into. I did bring, just so you know, I've got this prepped. Some trailers to show you guys too.
That's what we're going to get to after this next one.
All right, let's do that.
Because I want to talk about your trailers and like when you would throw, what trailers they are, a little prelude here for our audience. And then also I want to talk about your setups, like your rods, reel, and fluorocarbon, etc. Nice. So the next one is going to be an all-white spinnerbait, but with a gold and silver willow blade.
Okay, nice.
When would you throw that in the backwater situation?
Gold and silver. Yeah. Well, I do not throw a lot of double willows. You said double willow, right?
Yeah, it doesn't like a willow bladed spinnerbait. Yeah.
Yeah. So willow, Colorado.
1-1. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is a good thing. So the second willow, this is something to mention. It's just me. It's my quirk. Maybe it's actually true. I don't know. But I think about things kind of like with physics a lot, and the way that front willow leaf goes on a double willow, it like the back willow can rotate on this, swivel, right? It just rotates on the swivel like this, and it stays nice and tight. But once you get it here, it has to rotate around. It rotates around. This one, this Colorado here is rotating around. And to me, a willow being that wide, it just doesn't appeal to me, like it being that wide. This is more like for the physics. It's not as narrow and thin like a bait fish is. It's just flashing. It's staying in a line as it's swimming and just flashing every once in a while, but it's not like wobbling, like rotating in a big swirl like that. It bothers me from a physics and what I'm trying to mimic standpoint. Doesn't matter. It catches fish. People do it all, they smash them on double willows, but I'm just not a fan of it, because even when I'm burning a willow Colorado combination like this here, when I'm burning it, there are times and zones and places where you want to be able to slow it down a little bit in that strike zone, and a double willow, it's harder to do that. This having that single Colorado on the front for the tandem, it lets you slow down and kind of get that thump and displacement and just kind of keep it that strike zone a little bit longer. But a double willow, it seems like you got to burn it like a lot quicker, because that displacement. So anyway, that's my physics on that, why it bugs me. But for the example here, so it's white.
Yeah, white body with a silver blade, and we'll say a silver willow and a gold Colorado blade.
Yeah, so I'd love to hear your theory too on the different colors of the blades, but to me, it's we're talking murky water. It's not like you're mimicking one bait fish or the other based on that color selection. I don't get too particular on that kind of stuff, but I would say that's going to be a little bit more like I'm talking about. You're going to burn it a little quicker, run this one a little bit quicker, and obviously that Colorado blade being on there, it's going to let me slow down a little bit and let that bait just sort of fall and just do a little bit more thumping for that feel. You know what I mean? But yet, hopefully this water here, again, I'm kind of creating this situation a little bit, is not as murky as the situation we had before. It's a little bit clear. So once they
might be at where the backwater meets the main lake.
Right.
So in the drain coming out a little
2
bit
foot
clear.
of water visibility, 2 or 3 foot or 2.5, whatever, 1.5. But when they get closer, what's great about that willow is the flash is going to like pulse out, because it's now visual. Once they get close enough, it is a visual bite. So yeah, that's kind of what I would do. I'd burn it a little bit faster. And I particularly, what's cool about the Colorado being on the front, for me, you will get to a point. I know it's still cold now, so we're not talking about it, but this episode is certainly, we need to cover it. There's a point where the water gets warm enough in the high 50s where a buzzbait will catch them, right? Well, before that happens, in 60-degree waters, most people's kind of line for a buzzbait, depending on where you are in the country, I get it. That changes a little bit, but around 60. So in the mid 50s to upper 50s, you can start to a bait like that. You can actually start to let that front Colorado spit on the surface, or at least it creates a different wake where it creates
slightly
slightly under, where it's a wake bait. You know what I mean? In the sense that it's making a wave across either way, creating an actual wake, which is nice because they can use that surface wake to kind of hone in on it too. You know what I mean? I think that's nice. Kind of like a buzz bait would do, or just a regular wake bait. It's just they're using that surface commotion, whether they think it's a little, a wake bait's a small rodent or a fish or whatever. They're honing in on that V. That V gives them one single point to go back and follow, right, and hit. So that's the way I would fish that as well. But I do like the fact that it can fall really nicely with that combination. So you can vary those speeds and go a little slower and let it, fall by some wood.
Point.
Yeah.
Just being able to vary your retrieve. So like, say you see one wake on it, but he misses it. Maybe you can kill it, drop it and slow it down. Maybe he'll come out and get it, or speed it up if you see that he's chasing it. So I like baits that give the angler versatility in the way they're retrieving it. Like that's why chatterbait is so great. You can do so many different things with it, right? To make the fish trigger and bite with it. But
true.
I think it's time to move on to our trailer selections. So like what kind of trailers do you run on your spinnerbaits and why? Because I know you can basically put anything you want on the back of a spinnerbait and catch a fish on, and each bait that you put on there is going to make it have a different reaction in movement in the water. So kind of dive into the few that you like, Drew.
Yeah, I mean, a spinnerbait's mimicking a bait fish. So, anyone who puts a creature or a crawl, it's not wrong, especially if you're if it's a murky water spinnerbait, you could want something kind of gaudy, bulky, that's, black, whatever. You can put anything on the back that's just a creature bait. But I prefer, to use just obviously your swim baits. I've got that's a diesel minnow, 5-inch diesel minnow for a bigger. This is the minnows from Z-Man. I love to use this one. This is super popular. I'll rig one up here while we're talking. But again, I'm mimicking what it is. It's a bait fish, so I'm going to put that on there. And this is me personally. Again, I do not throw a ton of trailer hooks. I prefer a trailer as opposed to a trailer hook.
The same.
Yeah, really? Okay.
I don't like trailer hooks.
Yeah, I don't really like them, man. And so when a bass eats this, they flare their gills, they pull in water. And I feel like having this trailer on there gives them something that pulls in, helps suck in, and they're going to get hooked. And it's hard to run a trailer hook and a trailer. You can do it. It's a little funky with how it kind of has to fit on there, but so that's just my preference. And the other reason why that's my preference, and it applies to this conversation, is backwaters typically is about, it's a lot of cover you're throwing it at, it's a lot of structure. It's, and I like to make sure I get my bait back into that beaver, dam and pile, and back up into the junk, into the flooded, all that
over cypress arms and
yes, exactly, all the stuff that you see in the backwaters. It's not like it's a lot of open bank like Lake Hartwell, like it's just rock, and clay. This is like you're getting hung up a lot if you throw a trailer hook. That just adds one more way that the bait could get hung up. So I prefer to throw this and use a trailer just to kind of help it be a little bit more weedless, but I just thread it on. Elastec's a little funky. I will say that. Everyone knows that about the Elastec. It's a little tough to deal with, but the positive and why I love to use it, once it's on for good. And it's, really, really good stretchy material that Z-Man makes that I do love to use. But once it's on for good, but you got to be kind of, it takes a little practice to get it square, dead straight. And I do want to make sure, man, it's, I haven't fished in a long time, so we'll see how this goes on the first try, but I do want to make sure it's pretty straight. That's not bad. But I'm very particular about making sure that this is very, very straight on the bait. So that's pretty darn straight right there. What I mean is it's, you don't see a fish swimming, bent. Like if you do that wrong, you go too far into that bait, and then you come out, your guy's going to be squished, bent, and it won't swim straight. This holds true to any swim bait you rig up and fish. I know you throw a lot of swim baits out there in Lake Erie on a ball head, maybe, and, it's got to be perfectly straight. You just don't see a lot of bent fish swimming around. If you do, they're getting eaten pretty darn quick because they've been injured. So that's why, I'm very, very particular about keeping it dead, perfectly straight on your trailers. I mean, this one right here is a great example of a bait I would throw. And another thing I would do in a backwater that I'll show you on, let's just take this off. I will put before I forget, I do want to say I do throw straight tails and do throw other type of,
like curly tail grubs.
Yeah, you can throw that kind of stuff. But I just typically, this is it's a smaller one, but it's the goat. Yeah, it's the goat. You could do that. You could do it either direction on the, you could do it this way or you could do it this way, which this way is kind of cool because it looks like a fish tail, which these tails actually have to get pinched apart. So you could keep it together. Yeah. That tail, don't pull the tail apart. You can see there's some plastic that holds it together. You could actually keep it together like that, going vertical with it. But straight tails are really good too. But I just still love the boot tails. The only problem with the boot tails, to me, it's nice because it displaces water and it gives a nice swimming action. The only problem is every once in a while it does, and this may just be an Elastec issue, it loop back and catch on that hook.
It's all swim baits.
Okay, so it's any boot tails, especially that. But I still prefer them. I got confidence in them. I get bit, but I will say a little tip here that I do on spinnerbaits in backwater situations, muddy water situations. Which, by the way, I don't even throw a swim bait trailer on my clear water burning spinnerbaits. I just leave it a skirt. I trim it down to like the tail to like a V, makes it look a little bit more like a fish shape, and I just burn those clear water ones. So this is only for A couple things I do on
Here's
the
something I do want you to try with that Clearwater one.
yeah.
And it'll help keep it down a little bit more. Put a fluke on the back of it or
Okay.
whatever the Z-Man version is.
Yeah,
Something
streaks
that's streaks. So something that is straight tailed.
straight.
So when you're burning, you know how sometimes
Yep.
spinnerbaits will want to kick to the side when you burn and kind of start to
Yeah.
roll. That streaks will actually help keep it more vertical. So
Nice. Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
you're not going to miss out on bites when up
No.
here in the Finger Lakes in the fall when they get keyed in on alewives and shad. There's like a false shad spawn where they all push shallow. And I found when I burn any type of spinnerbait like a double willow, if it starts to roll, if I throw a fluke on there, I can keep going just as
Okay.
fast and it keeps it straight.
That's cool.
So,
That's a good tip because they make a streaks 3.75, so it's a straight tail 3.75 inch. So it's perfect for that. My smaller, I fish a smaller Clearwater burning spinnerbait, but it's not. It's got a hidden weight body to it, so it's actually heavy. Like I can throw something like 3/4 ounce, but I'm launching them in those Clearwater situations and burning them. I'm going to try that tip.
Yeah,
And put that up.
it just puts a keel on it, so
Yeah.
it helps keep it upright in the water column.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try that.
Slightly coming in at like a 45. So yeah, just
I love
try
it.
it, see what happens.
No, I love it, man. That's awesome. This is what I'll throw like a second skirt on. This is actually here, get a little tip if you're watching, a little juice if you're watching the Lure Lab here. This is a different material. You can see how iridescent it is. This is called Lumaflex, and it's hard to find, like very hard. See how it's got a shine to it as well.
Yeah.
So it's really cool because then actually it's a much more limber material and flexy. It's kind of like spandex or even that your Elastec, if you will, of a skirt in a way. It's very stretchy and it has a flow to it, like it's pretty cool. You have to see it. But I throw a second one of these on for my murky water backwater spinnerbaits, murky water. I throw a second one of these on. You got to go over that hook keeper here. So let's see if I can do that for you guys real quick. So I'm over that. So now I've got, what's cool is I've got like a thicker main right here. You see, like it's like a thicker main on the front here, which actually is cool because this is displacing water. That's like, it's a main. I don't know. I guess I said the right word already. It's a main. So it's wider. It's almost like these skirts that you'll see, these quick skirts from like Z-Man. And
so like if you're burning it and you pause it, it kind of flares.
Yeah, it flares out. There's a main and it's displacing more water because you've given it a wider profile there. So there's like a main on it now. And then you could still put the, and it's actually cool because I've got it a little bit extended longer there where it tapers down to this kind of fish shape. But I've also, then I'll throw on this swim bait we just did. So now you've got this just big, bulky, and then I'll add the, like a white willow, either one of these sizes or Colorado that's painted to it. So any
just
one of
to
those.
give the fish something to truly key on.
And it matches, obviously it all matches the chartreuse and the bait too. So I'll put all that together in one thing. I'm not going to, maybe I can rig it all up here if you want to see it all done, but basically I've already done it all, and shown you the whole setup. But that's what I would use in my murky water. And what's interesting about what I've learned about bass fishing is, look, guys, you can go out there and learn every rig you want. Nico, Carolina, Texas, swim baits, wake baits, prop baits, spy baits, you name it. There's a million things. But once you find something that works in a certain condition, a bass is a bass is a bass. They're going to eat it. I mean, like all the time. You don't have to get caught up into the marketing of bass fishing that you got to learn and know all this stuff, because honestly, only the guys who are full-time, the elite series, major league fishing, whatever, have enough time on the water to actually learn every single rig, the setup, line, rod, reel, and then have enough time on the water to know when and where to use it and why to use a Nico as opposed to a shaky head. Like, we are never going to need to know all that, and we're probably wasting our time because we don't have as much time on the water as they do. Wouldn't you rather be really good at the techniques that work at the few that hit all the water columns? I always encourage people, learn a couple top water techniques, learn a couple, shallow under the surface techniques, mid range, and then learn a few, like obviously they're going to hit the bottom of the water column and the bottom of the lake or the river. And then boom, like start perfecting those. There's a reason why Hackney and people, they're just so good with the jig. It's like, yeah, he may not be good at X, Y, and Z, but he'd be wasting his time and get, you know what I mean? Like to learn all that, he'd be kind of losing out on time. He would be spending perfecting the jig, and the jig still catches him and flipping and he crushes. So you get my point. I mean, we don't have the time he does. So how could we ever think we're going to learn all that? So I guess I'm saying this to say that's my setup. When I go to murky water, dude, they're either eating that or they're not there. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I just know that they bite
And it's
that.
your confidence knowing
Yeah.
that they're gonna eat it. And somebody could literally just, in contrary, right, go buy a Z-Man spinnerbait if they have a double Colorado one in
Hmm.
chartreuse and throw painted blades on it without the extra skirt and put a big old paddle tail on it and do the same thing. If that's what they have confidence in, they're gonna
Hmm.
get bit throwing it. And that's the way I am. I like simple. I don't
Absolutely.
like to modify a ton of things if I don't have to, but I will tweak with them, bend the steel up the wire on it to get it to run the way I wanted to. And knowing that
Right.
part of spinnerbait fishing, I think is just as important as throwing it out and getting bit. Like, you need to understand exactly how that bait is running to catch
Yeah,
fish.
for sure. No,
It's a lost
absolutely.
art, to be honest.
It is. It is. And the chatterbait coming along, it certainly works really good in a lot of places. The spinnerbait, used to be king,
Yeah.
but and that's a point to note here, guys. Yeah, you can skip a chatterbait for sure, but when you're around wood and other, it's hard to obviously skip a spinnerbait. They don't skip that well. Every once in a while with the right big trailer, you can get a few skips out of it.
Oh yeah,
But
until the wire
yeah,
bends a 45
yeah,
degree from it in water. Yeah, no good. But yeah, I
but for
love skipping
sure.
a spinnerbait when it allows me to.
Yep, that's right. But around wood and the way this thing, this is just a natural deflector. This is just a natural weed guard. It just rolls over anything, and then obviously the hook's way protected in the back, so it just rolls up and over everything. So wood, it is still king. You know, a lot of the burning situations we're talking about, grass. There's a lot of situations where, and the water clarity wise, it's just still a better tool, in my opinion, when you can get that cast there. The chatterbait I pick up when, I do need to skip it or the water's clear enough where I can see the wood that I can avoid and work around it with, because it definitely calls them in a different manner
Yeah.
that works really good too. So
For sure.
yeah.
Well, we're
All
going to
right.
start wrapping things up here. So, Drew, just real fast, kind of run everybody through what your spinnerbait setup is. So, like rod and why you
Yep.
choose what rod you do, reel, gear ratio, and line choice.
Yeah. So I like to keep my stuff pretty simple. I'm a power fisherman. It's a lot of buzzbait, spinnerbait, chatterbait kind of stuff, top water, let's say, chopos, stuff like that. And I have a weird, theory on all this. I don't want to get into it too deep here, but essentially I like to go out with everything that I throw that are my power baits like that. I throw them on the same length for every trip, whether I grab all 6 7s or all 7 1s or 7 3s or 7 6s, it doesn't matter. I want to keep them the same so that my casting, when I pick one up to the next, your first cast with a much shorter rod or longer rod is always off target. I want to be able to keep it the same, kind of like Bryson DeChambeau uses the same length clubs, right? For golf, they're all the same. He doesn't have to change his swing. So that's my strategy for this. And I typically throw straight braid on all spinner baits, chatterbaits, buzz baits, swim baits, just straight braid. And I work pretty fast, so they don't, my backwaters and any backwater that's murky, you can get away with that. Some people do prefer fluoro, but I'm in a kayak and I can't take a nice big crow hop back like on the deck of a bass boat or on the bank and set a hook into them, because I'll tell you what, I've fished straight braid for 15 years now, at least 20. And when I put fluoro on, I feel like it's a rubber band, and it doesn't have nearly as much stretch as mono. And I'm in a kayak that's moving with the fish. So I just can't stand it. Whenever I can get away with not, putting anything else on but braid, then I just stick with straight braid. So 30-pound braid, you don't want to go lighter than that on a bait caster if you can help it with braid. Fluoro and mono is different because it's all about the diameter size. So bait casters were made for heavier line, heavier
Yeah.
lures. And originally, when there was no braid, mono, you didn't really want to go below 14-pound because it starts to get too limber. And if it's too limber, then guess what? You're backlashing out of control. So with braid, it sounds crazy. I'm not going to catch a 30-pound bass, but 30 or 40-pound or 50 is perfectly fine. And it's what you want because the diameter is closer to that, 12 or 14-pound
Mm-hmm.
mono. And it's all about how flexible it is for you to be able to make the cast. But I prefer 30 because when you start getting in 40 and 50 and more, you're going to lose a little bit of casting distance. So to me, it's that perfect happy medium where I'm not backlashing all the time like a 15 or 20. Maybe it'd be a little bit more challenging, although still doable. But it's, so it's that happy medium. So that's why I use moss green, Sunline SX1 usually. And then medium heavy, like I said, just depending on the length. And I change lengths based on if I'm at a little creek that's going to cause me to do a lot of little roll casts like this. And there's trees everywhere. And it's like, like we're saying, Keith Bochet, super, super tight quarters action. And if I'm in somewhere that's I need longer casts, that's where the 7.3 and 7.6 come in. And if I'm in like a Tennessee River tail race or somewhere like that, then you just the leverage of horsing those fish in. That's in longer casts. They're perfect for that. You might even be throwing 3/4 or see me throwing an ounce spinnerbait in those kind of situations to get a little down deeper in with that current. But then what else? The rod and the reel. Sorry, the reel would be, I love throwing the fastest reel that anyone makes. And so for me, I've been using 8-to-1. I've been sponsored by 13 Fishing for, I don't know, 8 years. And that's, I think, coming to an end because Rapala merged with them and they're making a lot of changes. So I don't know if I'll be with them anymore, but I've always loved an 8-to-1 that I use from 13. And I personally know it's 8-to-1. If all my reels are the same, I just adjust because I know it's if I'm, which I don't throw a lot of crankbaits, but if I'm throwing something that needs a slower ratio, I do it. But slow rolling a spinnerbait in the spring, I know it's 8-to-1. So I just go slow and I can feel the thump. Yeah. And I can feel the speed, and I just do it. I know what the speed is. So, but the trick is too, when you're done with a cast, it sounds crazy, but Jacob Wheeler's proven it. And I've always fished the same way, the same logic. And remember the tournament he won sight fishing on the St. Lawrence when he was using 12-pound test to sight all those fish, and he was horsing them in with a bait caster quicker than everyone else who was sight fishing using 6-pound test. And they were fighting. So over the course of the day, he was able to horse more fish in and catch more fish. And the MLF, make more casts. So when my cast is done, that 8-to-1 gear ratio, I know I'm like burning it back to the next spot. And it's like saving me little minuscule pieces of time over the course of the day. And it does add up. Trust me, you will get more casts. So that's why I like to use the faster speed. Plus, when I am throwing my buzz baits and things that would be on the surface and going faster with, it's just easier to work those baits at the faster speed. But I don't change when I, go to slower 40, 50 degree water, real rod and reel setups.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So perfect.
At least there's a logic behind my madness. I mean, I always have a reason and a logic. I can't say, in bass fishing is one of those things when it works for you and feels right and you've got it dialed, no one can argue with results, so.
Yeah. I think I only own one reel slower than like 7.4. And that's my like square bill or deep diving crankbait reel when I need to get it down and keep it there. And that's about the only time I ever go that slow of a reel. Everything is 7.2, 7.4, 8-to-1, 8.5-to-1.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's speed kills, and speed can sometimes really, really kill you, or it'll crush the fish, and you can make 50 more casts than your guy that's fishing the same flat as you if you fish it properly. So
that's true.
Well, Drew, anything else you want to touch on here before I let you run?
I think we covered it, man. I think you guys got a good little lesson here. It is kind of impromptu. I'm glad you hit me up, and I love it when I can you and I just know the sport so well that on a moment's notice, like, I know you don't need any prep. I don't need any prep. We'll just, give the juice right away. So hopefully you guys learn something.
To be honest, like a lot of these Lure Lab episodes is just like impromptu questionnaires. Like I make like an outline of questions, but I usually just kind of fly by the seat of my pants based on the outline I made and where the conversation is going. And I think that's one beautiful thing about fishing, right? Is that we can have like even flow conversations and have no prompts on it and still be able to have a great conversation based on what we're talking about because we understand the complexity, but also the simplicity of what bass fishing is.
Yeah, it's so true, man. But yeah, I love it, man. And glad to be a part of the show today. And you guys follow along this year. I'll be fishing the Bassmaster Kayak Series mostly, and I'll be out at the Classic. I don't know when this goes live, but I will be at the Columbus Fishing Expo this weekend, which is, I don't know what it is, February 9th and 10th or whatever. And then also next weekend, the Indianapolis Sports Show, which is, I guess that's like the 16th weekend of February. So you guys come see me there. I'll be doing some seminars. And then at the Classic, I'll be fishing the Bassmaster Kayak Series Championship. And then after that, I'll be fishing more events and running the new Kayak Adventure Series that I started with presented by GoPro, which is a pretty cool new kayak series. We'll have seminars on the Fridays of those series too. So that's pretty cool because we'll be doing some more teaching and Lure Lab type cool stuff for anglers who attend those events. So it's a whole weekend with festival and just fun stuff for the whole family. So yeah,
I actually look forward to seeing all of the
Yeah.
information that comes out from that. So keep us in the loop on that. And I
Will
look
do.
forward to seeing all your travels, and hopefully you win a few more trophies this year. And I
That'd be
wish you the
cool.
best of luck, Drew. Thanks for coming on, and we'll chat soon. All right.
All right, man. See ya.
All right, have a good one. All right. Thank you, everyone who tuned into this week's episode here on the Lure Lab. As always, all the baits and rods and reels and such that we talked about are listed down in the description. And if you go on over to the Omnia website, you can save yourself 10% by typing in the code Serious10 at checkout. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Drew. He's a fantastic fisherman, has accomplished a lot of things on the kayak side, and it was long overdue. I can't believe it took 68 episodes to get Drew on the Lure Lab here, but we're thankful that he was able to come on today. Hope everyone took some lessons and some pointers away from backwater spinnerbait fishing that you can also apply to main lake spinnerbait fishing. And just as always, fish your confidence, get on the water, catch a bunch of fish, tag us in it, Lure Lab, Serious Angler, doesn't matter which page. And we love sharing it and seeing all the successes of all the anglers who tune in on a weekly basis. But until next time, we will see you then.